Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello, listeners of Business Innovators Radio. This is your host, Andy Curry, and today I have with me Bob Whipple. I'm really excited to have Bob here. Bob has been speaking for 12 years. And the content he speaks on is really interesting. He has 6 topics that are all related to trust. Bob is known as Bob Whipple, the Trust Ambassador, and I'm really excited to hear about that. Now, Bob speaks in the U.S., and he's done some international work as well. He's based out of New York. Bob has written 4 books, and he's a contributing author to 4 other books. And Bob, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andy. It's nice to be here.
We're really fired up to have you here, Bob. So let's talk about your speaking business. Tell the listeners what it is that you speak about, the types of groups you help, and kind of what goes on when you do it.
It's a wide range from military groups to a lot of different corporate groups, government groups, education markets, legal, anywhere where there are people, and especially leaders, who are interested in trying to maximize potential of their organization. They'll find that trust quite often is a big problem. And so I go in and I help organizations understand what it is, how to get more of it, and how to deal with what I call trust withdrawals or, problems in trust.
Now, what is it about the trust? What's the problem there? Can I go into that further?
Well, if you do a survey in any organization, you're going to find that I'd say 80 to 85% of organizations, the people are not very engaged in the work. And the reason that they're not very engaged in the work and not very productive is because there's very low trust between the workers and management. And the fundamental reason behind that is that leaders really want to obtain high trust in their organization, but they don't recognize that it's their own behaviors that are causing the problem. So I go in and try to help them understand what those behaviors are that are creating the difficulties in trust and how they can change them.
So when you say trust, like the employee doesn't trust management, would that be examples like the management says, okay, if you accomplished such and such, we're going to promote you, or they're promising things and not delivering, or what exactly are some of the issues?
Well, sure, those kinds of things happen. There are nepotism things where the wrong people get promoted because they have contacts. That's a big one that comes up quite often. I think the biggest one and the most important one is that people feel that if they really tell the truth, if they really tell what they think, that they're going to get punished. So it's not a safe environment. There's a lot of high fear in most organizations, and it's because of the behaviors of leaders that create that fear. People know that if they tell what they really think, they're going to get clobbered, so they don't say anything, or they talk behind their backs.
Now, nepotism meaning hiring or promoting like a brother or cousin or something instead of somebody who could be more qualified, correct?
Correct.
How rampant is that, or is it?
Well, I don't think it's the biggest part of the problem. You certainly do run into it. In most situations, there are political forces at work where there's some degree of doubt in the mind of the average worker why this person got the job. And so that it doesn't necessarily have to be my cousin, but it can be somebody that I brought in from another company that I knew and worked with before, and all of a sudden he's the senior vice president over everybody else. That happens quite often.
The ultimate example of nepotism would be Kim Jong-il, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Now, you are known as Bob Whipple, the Trust Ambassador. So let's talk about that, where that came from, what that means, how important that is, all that.
Well, that's my trademark that I use when I speak at any organization. I have a logo associated with it and a blog on which I write every week some aspect of trust. So the blog is www.thetrustambassador.com. And so basically, it's how I communicate. It's the face that I put out to the world, that I am a person who's dedicating the rest of my working life to helping to grow leaders, especially in the dimension of creating higher trust in their organizations. So I'm a leadership development consultant and speaker with a specialty very deep and a Lifetime Achievement Award for being a top thought leader in the area of trust worldwide.
I want to go back to the employee trust thing. And I used to run a hardware store, lumberyard for my dad years ago, and we'd have store meetings, and I'd ask people for opinions. And they have them.
Yeah.
But a lot of them aren't saying anything. And I think like you were describing, most management probably thinks the floor is wide open for them to say things, but they don't.
Right.
So describe one of the tactics you do to help facilitate employees being able to say what they think so they can participate.
Yeah. I have a 3-part model on how to build trust. And the first one is what I call table stakes, which are sort of prerequisites. If you don't have the ability to communicate well, if you're not honest, if you're not ethical, then you're never going to build trust anyway. So you might as well get out of the game. Those are table stakes. And I have a second category of things which I call enabling actions, which are the more that you can do of those kinds of things, the more trust you will build. And paradoxically, for example, let me give you an example of an enabling action: admitting mistakes. It turns out for a leader to admit mistakes is usually a very strong trust-building action. The only time it's not a trust-building action is if the person's made the same mistake several times, or it's such a dumb mistake it reveals them to be totally clueless. But most of the time, mistakes are innocent mistakes, and when you, as a leader or manager, when you admit them, trust goes up. The biggest and most powerful part of the equation I call reinforcing candor. And that is the ability of a leader to make people glad, not sad, when they bring up scary stuff. So if my leader is doing something that I think is maybe a little bit shady in terms of ethics, I know that if I say, hey, wait a minute, is that really the right thing to be doing? That I'm not going to get clobbered for it or fired for it. Instead, I'm going to be thanked and be treated like a real contributing member of the organization. And if the leaders can understand the value of that, what I call reinforcing candor, it changes the whole equation.
Okay, very interesting. Now, you have been speaking professionally for 12 years. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
How did you get started? How did that all begin?
Well, I guess I'm a natural. I have a heritage of my ancestors were all speakers and trainers and things like that. So it just comes to me naturally. I loved to entertain. My programs are quite entertaining, sort of a lot of fun, but also really serious business in terms of how to change the performance of an organization. And so all through my career, I sort of did a lot more in the area of speaking in front of groups, teaching people. I spent an awful lot of time in the classroom teaching leaders how to lead better. Most other managers didn't spend that kind of time doing that. But I always think that the most important thing a leader can do is grow other leaders.
You've spoken to lots of groups. First of all, at the top of your head, how many groups would you say you've spoken to over the 12 years? Have you even lost count?
Yeah, you can think of it as 50 to 60, something a little less than 100 a year, but something in that order.
Okay.
Lots.
Now, surely, when you've spoken, you've got some events that really stick out in your mind where you really felt like you made an impact? What one really jumps out at you? And talk about that.
Well, there's lots. I just did a very powerful one down in Jamaica in May that worked out really well in terms of helping an organization understand the value of trust and get on a vector. But let me tell you one that was local in my hometown. I got a phone call one day in the afternoon from a chairman of the board of a local company. And he said, "Bob, we need your help. Can you get over here? These executives in my company are about to tear each other limb from limb. I think we're going to have a homicide. They just hate each other." And that was right from the very top of the organization. There was all kinds of distrust and hatred
Really?
that had permeated. And so I went to work in that organization, and one of the first things I did was do a trust evaluation. And that group evaluated trust as their biggest weakness. So we went to work, and actually I didn't do a lot of. They did all the work. I just helped them see, what work they needed to do. And less than a year later, so it was about 10 months later, I repolled that same group of executives. Some of them had left, but it was basically the same group, and they rated trust as their number one strength.
No kidding.
In less than a year.
Now, what caused all the distrust?
Oh, all kinds of things. Interpersonal conflicts, people not, poor communication, really simple stuff. But it was a very high fear organization, very closed, and people weren't even talking to each other. When they did, they would undermine each other. So I went to work on teaching them the methods that I've taught lots of organizations on how to improve the culture to include higher trust. And the productivity shot up. Usually you can double productivity in a year without too much trouble. And, you ask a CEO, how would you like to double your productivity? They think you're kidding, but it's true. You can do it. So people started feeling better about each other and started feeling better about the operation. And then we did a strategy, which they got their act together and figured out what they really wanted to do in life. And they set about to do it. And a year later, they're feeling great.
Now, I got to ask, you're the trust ambassador, but how did you come to all this, and how did it develop into what it is now?
Good question, Andy. I worked for 30 years in a corporate setting, so Fortune 500 organization, and I had a major division that was reporting to me, so I had several thousand employees reporting to me. So I knew what it was like to be a senior leader. And I surrounded myself, basically I set up what I call the leadership laboratory for many, many years, a couple decades, studying what's effective and what doesn't work, and what things are helpful and what things take you in the wrong direction. And so I surrounded myself with really world-class leaders, and we learned from each other. And in that process, I would say about 3/4 of the way through my career there, I immediately began to see the coalescing of this element of trust. If you have trust, you understand how to get it, and you understand how to maintain it, and you understand how to repair it when it's compromised, then all of the other leadership behaviors fall into place and work like magic. But if you can't develop high trust, then you work like crazy, and it's really a struggle. Mm-hmm. So I found it to be the magic, I call it the golden key, that unlocks all of the other behaviors and makes them work.
Interesting. Now, Napoleon Bonaparte, the famous French general from the 1800s, I think it was.
Yep.
There's a famous deal where he would tell his generals, don't tell me what's going well. I don't want to know that, because that in itself is taking care of itself. Tell me what's not going right. Mm-hmm. That's what I want to know. Isn't that, so he can fix it? Isn't that kind of the goal there that's going on?
No, not really. What you want is, by the way, the guy that you should quote is Napoleon Hill, not Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte is the name of my tractor. But Napoleon Hill is really what I consider the father of great leadership. His theories are the basis for most modern day management gurus. All the people that you hear about, Wayne Dyer, and I can't name them all, but just hundreds of Zig Ziglar, and all the theories, Brian Tracy, John Maxwell. They all, you can trace back their philosophies to Napoleon Hill. But to answer your question, no, you don't seek to hide good things or bad things. It's not a matter of good or bad. It's a matter of transparency. It's a matter of being open and being aware and interested. But mostly it's a matter of not punishing people when you hear something you didn't want to hear.
Right.
That's the tricky part. And that's what I teach leaders how to do.
Now, I would think, when I was running the store, I didn't want to hear things, but I did, but I didn't. And I'll bet you run across that a lot. Would that be correct?
Sure. Absolutely.
And how do you get them to be open-minded to hear the things they don't want to hear? How do you get them to do that?
Well, what you have to do is you have to sneak up on them and catch them from behind, catch them when they're not looking. The idea is this: you teach them with data. I can show data on the benefits that you get when you do have a culture of high trust, and the way to get it of reducing the fear and making it open and making it people so that people can say what they need to say right in front of you without worry, and teach them the benefits of that, and then ask them to try it. And just try it in little ways. Try it and see if you don't see a difference. And what happens is some of them don't. Some of them just say, "Oh, that's a very interesting theory. Very good. Thank you very much," and they pay me, and I'm on my way. But the ones that actually do try it and then maybe get a little coaching after that on what's working and what's not working, see such a tremendous difference in a short. I mean, I'm not talking it take years. I'm talking months. It takes a few months of really working at this thing and changing your habits to all of a sudden see an immense difference in productivity, an immense engagement, higher engagement and empowerment among the people. And they love it. And you all of a sudden are so much happier being a leader, because really good leaders are happy people. The poor managers and the ones that struggle are the ones that don't know how to get trust, and they're miserable all the time because they have to protect themselves, because if they say anything wrong, the people are going to get them.
Right. Interesting. Well, Bob, I don't know what I'm doing today. Sorry. Tell me how, if people want to get a hold of you, want you to speak or get some coaching and such, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, my site is www.leadergrow.com. And you can get in touch with me through that. There's lots of ways you should contact me, and I get it immediately. My email is bwhipple, WHIPPLE, @leadergrow.com.
Okay, very good. Well, Bob, thank you so much for giving us some insight into your speaking business, what you do, and how you help people. That's fascinating information.
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.